reaching the end of our time here, but I think you can all agree that the SNP has absolutely let us down when it comes to the NHS. And that is something that is vitally important to each and every one of us here. And the Scottish Conservative vision of a modern, efficient, local Scottish health service that is accessible for all is one that will really make a difference going forwards. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hello, conference. It is a pleasure to be back in my hometown of Glasgow and to address you today. My name is Rob and I am the newest MSP in Scotland. So take it easy on me, will you? Thank you. It is an honour to be asked to introduce Douglas Ross at my first conference as one of 4 Scottish Conservative MSPs representing Mid-Scotland and Fife. That I'm here in this capacity today seemed a distant prospect just 8 months ago when I was sat at home watching television. It was late on a Friday night and I was sitting in my slippers with my feet up and the phone rang next to me. And usually at that time of night it's a scam call, so I didn't answer the phone. I'll be honest with you, now I've got used to answering the phone call as an MSP, but then I didn't. So I let it ring out. And to my surprise, the caller left a message. And you can only imagine the range of emotions I had when I found out that the person at the other end of the line was Douglas. He asked me whether I wanted to serve as a member of the Scottish Parliament. And it was the honour of my life to accept. It has taken a long time for me to get here. Thank you. I started work at House of Fraser as an apprentice and I went on to establish a distribution company with my husband. I took the path less travelled. By leaving school, going out, getting a job and working my way up. Conference, like every person in this room today, I'm not afraid of hard work. And it is hard work which is going to enable us to carry our message directly to the people of Scotland at the next general election and beyond. The truth is that it's only the Scottish Conservatives, under the leadership of Douglas Ross, who have the ability to unseat SNP MPs and put the final nail in the coffin of the SNP independence referendum obsession. The SNP, under the leadership of Nicola Sturgeon, and for the time being, Humza Yousaf, is mired in sleaze, incapable of governing our country and distracted from the real issues. Every day, the Scottish Conservatives in Holyrood have stood up to the SNP, stood up to their demands for a second independence referendum, challenged their disastrous handling of the pandemic, and rejected deeply flawed and damaging gender reforms. And we will not stop. People are struggling to pay bills. Scots are waiting on NHS waiting lists for years, unable to see their GP. Parents are struggling with the cost of childcare. The attainment gap is as wide as ever in our schools, and we have a soft-touch justice system which puts the rights of the perpetrator ahead of the rights of the victim. The Scottish Conservatives are looking to a better future to restore our failing education system, rebuilding our stagnant economy and reinvigorating our communities. And only under the stewardship of Douglas Ross are we demonstrating to the people of Scotland that there is another way. The SNP Green government, backed in every sense by Labour, has brought Scotland to the brink. So during my short time in Holyrood, I have seen firsthand that Douglas, in contrast to Humza's arrogance, is forensically focused on holding the SNP to account every day. From the ferry scandal to the disastrous deposit return scheme and an NHS which is failing patients and staff, Douglas is leading the fight for the people of Scotland's priorities. For Scotland at the heart of our United Kingdom.
Scotland faces big challenges right now. From the global cost of living crisis to our overstretched health service, families are worried about their future and what life will be like for the next generation. Right across the country, people just want a party that's going to focus on what matters to them, that is going to stand up for their real priorities when there's so much political division and distraction.
Scotland needs a government focused on the real priorities of people across Scotland and the big challenges we face.
For all those people, the Scottish Conservatives are on your side. We are totally focused on the real priorities of families up and down the country, working with the UK government to help struggling families and protect Scottish jobs, holding the SNP government to account for its performance on vital public services.
And the problem for the First Minister is he has been personally involved in this very scandal from the very beginning.
And bringing forward positive ideas and policies to deal with the big challenges Scotland faces today. We want to build a better Scotland today and for the next generation. The Scottish Conservatives are focused on your real priorities.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, I am proud to introduce the leader of the Scottish Conservatives, Douglas Ross.
Thank you very much, Ros, for that introduction. Our newest MSP making a vital contribution to our parliamentary team. And having just listened to her backstage, I can confirm she's even answering my phone calls now as well. So that's a good start. Conference, I want to begin by congratulating you all. For years, in election after election, we were told that Nicola Sturgeon would be unstoppable. That it was a question of when, not if, she would deliver independence. How many times did we see newspaper headlines saying that Scotland was on the cusp of India F2? One particular paper tended to run that story every other day. Often, it seemed like we were the lone voice of criticism, the only party opposing her demands for a second independence referendum, the only party challenging her handling of the pandemic, the only party standing up to her gender reforms. We knew that her government and her party, shrouded in secrecy, was not as squeaky clean as they liked to portray. And we were criticised again and again for going against the Holyrood consensus who heaped praise on her. But no one is saying we're wrong now. No one is saying we're wrong. Nicola Sturgeon's legacy lies in tatters. Her political career ended in failure. And all of you in this hall and around the country deserve credit for seeing her off. As the Prime Minister said this morning, it was the Scottish Conservative and Unionist Party that stopped the SNP winning a majority just 2 years ago. It was Scottish Conservative and Unionist MSPs that fought her dangerous gender reform bill every step of the way. And it was our Scottish Conservative Secretary of State for Scotland, my friend Alistair Jack, who stood up for the rights of women and girls by sending that flawed bill back to the Scottish Government. Nicola Sturgeon kept saying and talking about wiping out the Tories, yet because of your hard work, it's her that's gone. Now, without Nicola Sturgeon, that deserves a round of applause, I think. Without Nicola Sturgeon, the SNP have entered into total meltdown. The formerly legendary discipline has evaporated. The unity has now totally broken down. Former colleagues have become bitter rivals. The parties ran out of cash. The police have arrested senior officials. And to top it all off, Humza Yousaf has become First Minister. I can't think of a more obvious sign of a party in crisis than that. As Kate Forbes so memorably said, when he was Transport Minister, the trains never ran on time. When he was Justice Minister, the police were strained to breaking point. And when he was Health Minister, there were record high waiting times. Thank you, Kate. Thank you for that Highland honesty and for doing our work for us. We've been saying that for years. Now clearly those in the SNP also agree. Because the result of the SNP election proved that. Almost half of his own party didn't think he was up to the job. During the leadership contest, Humza Yousaf proudly proclaimed himself as the continuity candidate, a comment that must come back to haunt him now. But it's true. As SNP leader, he's continued the same divisive approach as his predecessor, continuing to campaign for independence, continuing to engineer constitutional conflicts with the UK government, continuing to ignore the real priorities of people across Scotland. In another one of his ill-advised self-proclamations, Humza Yousaf declared himself the first activist. And that pretty much sums up his whole approach to government. He's more interested in being the first activist than First Minister, in obsessing over splitting up communities than appealing to the country, in uniting the SNP rather than uniting Scotland, in being a nationalist cheerleader than a national leader. And he even appointed a Minister for Independence, a Minister for Independence in his government solely to drive forward the SNP's political obsession. That is taxpayers' money shamefully taken away from our public services to pay the wages of a nationalist campaigner. In yet another claim, Humza Yousaf said that he would shift independence into fifth gear. Yet instead, with this famously uninsured driver at the wheel, the campaign is going into reverse. The camper van has stalled, and if Ash Regan's independence thermometer was in operation right now, the mercury would have fallen out of the bottom. And of course, the SNP's financial troubles have blown a huge hole in their economic case for independence. Remember, the SNP said they wanted to hold a referendum in just 6 months' time. They can't even get an auditor in the same time frame. They wanted to set up a central bank when they won't even submit their own accounts. They would borrow billions of pounds from the taxpayers here in Scotland to finance a new country when they still owe tens of thousands of pounds to Peter Murrell. And just for you, Greg, I've got to say to our UK party chair, I'm a bit surprised that the police haven't found a note from Nicola saying there's no money left. Honestly, if I'd known the state the party was in, then I might have bet Nicola Sturgeon a lot more than £100 that I would outlast her. And I've got to say, I'd make the same bet with Humza Yousaf, but I'm not sure he can afford it. But seriously, the SNP cannot even manage their own accounts. How can they be trusted with the finances of an independent Scotland? No one will ever believe a nationalist again on currency, on pensions, or on balancing the books. We've always known that our arguments on trade, currency and jobs were stronger, and the 2014 referendum proved that. But now the SNP lack any credibility. Through their own blunders, the nationalists have crashed the case for independence. Yet, incredibly, despite all that's been done, Humza Yousaf still won't put the blame on his predecessor for the state of his party. Even with an ongoing police investigation, he is so indebted to his puppet masters that he can't cut the strings from Nicola and Peter Murrell. The most powerful couple in the ruling party of government were running the show as a private affair. Well, together, they have smashed to pieces any notion that the SNP are of a higher standard than other parties. And because Humza Yousaf can't bring himself to cut the former leadership loose, this scandal just continues to get worse and worse. However, we can't afford to be complacent. Yes, the SNP are down, but they are not out. We need to work hard to seize the opportunity we've been presented rather than revelling in their misery. Because the SNP are the party of government, responsible for managing our vital public services and supporting our economy. At a time when families across Scotland are worried about the state of our country, worried about whether they can make ends meet, worried about relatives stuck on an NHS waiting list for months and years, worried about their job in a changing economy. This SNP government is too distracted by their internal scandals and their obsession with independence to focus on the big challenges Scotland faces today. We saw that as clear as day in Humza Yousaf's attempt to relaunch last week, just 20 days into the job. We were boldly promised that he would set out the priorities for his government. Yet instead, on the same day, we got a First Minister defending even more scandal when one of his own MSPs was arrested by the police. For years, we've said that the SNP were unwilling to get on with the job, but they are now becoming increasingly incapable of delivering the leadership that Scotland needs. And all the while, the real priorities of Scottish people are being ignored. The SNP government aren't talking about how we rebuild our health service from the pandemic and Humza Yousaf's mismanagement. It's from our benches that people hear Sandish Gulhani standing up for his healthcare colleagues and patients. The SNP aren't talking about the state of our economy and the damage the Greens in government are doing, but people can see Liz Smith campaigning for rates relief and reform for Scottish businesses. The Nationalists aren't talking about how 16 years of SNP government has devastated Scottish education and let down a generation of young people. So it's left to Stephen Kerr to set out our plans to restore Scottish educational standards. Right across Scotland, people of all political backgrounds, right and left, unionist and nationalist, are looking for a party to focus on the issues and the services that really matter to them. In Anas Sawar's Labour Party, they see a party more interested in soundbites, in playing politics, than standing up for the views of the majority of Scots. Remember, he whipped his MSPs to back Nicola Sturgeon and the SNP's Gender Reform Bill, and he supports Humza Yousaf's legal challenge against the UK government. No party focused on the real priorities would support the Nationalists in playing their constitutional games at these challenging times. Anas Sawar has given Humza Yousaf's government a free pass to pursue their political obsession instead of opposing, as we do, the SNP. Of course, with this, he's not just supporting the SNP, he's opposing the views of the majority of Scots on gender recognition reform and even a majority of Labour voters. And in supporting the SNP, he's only helping to keep the Scottish Parliament from focusing on the issues that really matter to the Scottish public. So it's up to us, the Scottish Conservatives, to be the only party that voters can trust, to always stand up to the SNP government when they refuse to prioritise on the issues that really matter. We are focused on the real priorities of the Scottish people, and we offer them a vision of a better Scotland with credible plans to deliver it into the future. Now, we know that one of the biggest issues of concern to them is rising household bills. Vladimir Putin has been using global energy markets as a weapon in his illegal war against Ukraine, driving up heating costs for ordinary families and endangering our supply. Rishi Sunak and the UK government have already taken decisive action to cap bills to protect households from the worst of these increases. But as a longer-term fix, we need to ensure that we back Scotland's energy sector to secure our supply. However, under the influence of the Green coalition partners, the SNP continue to fail Scotland's oil and gas sector. Ironically, the former party of Scotland's oil now wants to shut down North Sea production as soon as possible, putting at risk tens of thousands of Scottish jobs. And Scottish Labour backs that position wholeheartedly. Under my leadership, the Scottish Conservatives will always stand up for North East workers and the sectors that employs them. We will always put their jobs first. Through the hard work of our strong team of North East MPs and MSPs, and I'm pleased to say there's too many of them to actually name individually, we are now the only party standing up for Scotland's oil. But that doesn't mean we're opposed to delivering net zero, because achieving our climate goals will also help to cut bills for families through reducing demand. The majority of Scottish families live in housing that doesn't meet modern energy efficiency standards. Hundreds of thousands of households are seeing hundreds of pounds of their money seeping through old windows, walls and roofs every month. Yet many cannot afford the thousands or even tens of thousands of pounds required to better insulate their homes. The SNP government has plans for the social rented sector, but homeowners shouldn't be forced to help deliver a government target without government support. That's why Scottish Conservatives would introduce a Help to Renovate scheme. This would ensure that every Scottish homeowner has access to grants and loans for energy efficiency improvements. And net zero must also be delivered with community consent and benefit at its heart. Yet SNP ministers have overturned local planning objections in favour of wind farm developments far too many times. That is a Holyrood power grab on our communities. I experienced it when I chaired the Planning Committee in Murray Council years ago, and it continues today. At the same time, communities receive a pittance in contributions from developers and operators. Those communities deserve to benefit directly from local projects that we're all reliant on for our energy security. So that's why I'm announcing today that we will bring forward a community energy benefit law. This would ensure that those communities, not the SNP government, have the final say on energy developments in their local area. And it would force developers and operators to negotiate deals that make meaningful financial payments to communities, which could also be used to directly cut energy bills. When I was in the Western Isles last year, and up in Shetland just a couple of weeks ago, that was an issue that was raised and a request made by many. The Scottish Conservatives have listened, and this proposal would not only create an incentive to unblock the planning barriers to energy infrastructure, it would also ensure that families and communities always benefit directly from those developments. Taken together, these plans that we're publishing today in a policy paper will deliver lower bills for Scottish families and ensure that they have the final say in Scotland's energy future. Now, another big challenge that Scotland is facing right now is the state of our NHS. We heard it in the session just before now. It's unbelievable that the SNP were somehow so impressed by Humza Yousaf's running of the health service that they decided to make him First Minister. Even he thought he'd done such a bad job that he had to appoint a Cabinet Secretary for NHS recovery. And boy, is it needed. The worst A&E waiting times in history. Think about it, the worst A&E waiting times in history. 53,000 patients stuck for more than half a day last year. And 1 in 7 on an NHS treatment list. Some who've been waiting for years. Our NHS is in crisis. For months, Scottish Conservatives, alongside healthcare professionals, have said that the SNP's flimsy recovery plan is not cutting it. And we set out our own plans to help the NHS cope with the worst of the winter crisis. It included allowing patients to see live A&E waiting times, expanding same-day operations, and introducing maximum waiting times. Yet this tin-eared Scottish SNP government ignored our plan and the concerns of patients and professionals. The Scottish Conservatives know that more than anything else, Scots just want an NHS that is there for them and their loved ones when they need it most. We know that one of the areas under threat is the future of local GP services. Yet the SNP are still failing to deliver their funding promises to general practice. The Remote and Rural General Practice Working Group delivered their recommendations in January 2020, to ensure that GP surgeries have the funding and staff they need to continue. But those recommendations have been gathering dust on a shelf rather than being implemented. So Scottish Conservatives would implement those plans as a matter of urgency to save our surgeries, not just in rural areas, but right across the country. And we also need to focus on the substantial health challenges that we all know Scotland faces. We're holding our conference in the fantastic city of Glasgow. But in 2021, the last year that figures are available, 311 Glaswegians died because of drug misuse, the highest number anywhere in the country. Everyone, a life that could have been saved, and a family mourning a loved one who was failed by a system that didn't work for them. For years, Nicola Sturgeon's eye was off the ball, and it seems Humza Yousaf will be no different. The SNP are letting some of the most vulnerable people in Scotland die by not giving them access to the treatment options that they deserve. That's why we're, in this party, continuing the work to pass the Right to Recovery Bill that would give Scots legal access to the addiction recovery treatment that they need. Yet, we need to go further in tackling the public health killers that blight our country. For example, a recent Public Health Scotland report found that over the last decade, suicide was the biggest killer of young people in our country. Sadly, that is the experience of 753 families in Scotland last year. We need to do more. That's why we would roll out mental health ambulances to ensure there's a dedicated response for mental health emergencies. And we would give mental health crisis centres the funding they don't yet get, but absolutely deserve. If we tackle the big public health challenges facing Scotland, we also save our NHS resources in the long term and put the relentless decline in standards into the reverse. That's what we can achieve with a government that is focused on the task of leading our health service instead of one that's content to manage its decline while its attention is distracted elsewhere. Our NHS is Scotland's most treasured institution. It needs a government that gives it the focus it absolutely deserves. And speaking of top priorities, I'm long enough in the tooth to remember the SNP government saying that education was their #1 priority. It never was under Nicola Sturgeon, and I'm really wondering if it ever will be under Humza Yousaf. Because when I was growing up, our Scottish education system was the envy of the world. Yet over the last 16 years, our schools have fallen to record lows in international league tables. And Nicola Sturgeon completely failed in her goal of closing the attainment gap. The next generation of Scots, my kids and yours, are being left poorer because of the actions of the SNP government. That, for me, is the greatest failure of their time in office. When I look at my two wee boys, Alistair and James, when they're not fighting with each other or playing with the chickens and the goats, I know that one of the biggest reasons I'm in politics is to deliver better opportunities for them and children like them up and down the country. What kind of society are we if we don't prioritise that? My own parents, my mum a school cook, my dad a farm labourer, didn't have much, but they worked hard to give me and my sisters the best possible start in life. We in this party know that a good education is the best way to deliver, no matter where people come from or their background. So even in these times of stretched resources, we must prioritise restoring Scotland's education for the next generation. That means giving teachers the support and, even more importantly, the trust to teach. Firstly, though, we need to attract good teachers to come to the profession and, crucially, stay in it. Teachers are burnt out. They feel like this SNP government is asking more of them, but not upholding their end of the bargain by tackling issues that make their job more difficult. That's why the Scottish Conservatives discussed plans this morning on a new deal for teachers. Our deal would cut down on paperwork, give teachers more time to prepare quality lessons, and reward them for extra classes and after-school teaching. This would incentivise teachers to go above and beyond and to help every pupil achieve their potential. We'd also increase the powers of head teachers to take decisions over the running and priorities of their school and improve the teaching of essential life skills, so that we're ensuring that teaching is more aligned to the needs of pupils rather than the national targets set in Holyrood. Taken together with our exciting plans for a national tutoring and mentoring service, increased subject choice and improved STEM teaching, the Scottish Conservatives have a plan to restore Scottish education. Where the SNP have failed, we would make giving the next generation the best start in life our #1 priority. They said they would do it, they didn't. We said we would do it, we will deliver. But we know that learning and skills development can't just be for children and young people. As our economy changes, people will have to change careers. Yet in Scotland, we don't do anywhere near enough to support those workers. Some of the most dynamic economies in the world have a strong support system for adult learning and reskilling. It needs to be at the core of how we tackle the fourth industrial revolution and the productivity challenge. That's why the Scottish Conservatives have proposed the creation of a national college, and why we would give every Scot a right to retrain through use it or lose it skills funding, so that wherever people live and whatever their ability, they can access high-quality education for training and upskilling, and so that we can deliver the growth today and in the future. Now, we heard earlier in his remarks on the stage and his answers to questions just how passionate our Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, and the UK Government are to see Scotland's economy thrive and grow. But the SNP and their Green partners see growth as an evil. They believe that wealth and business and enterprise are dirty words. Supporting businesses for them means hiking taxes and introducing a botched deposit return scheme. A scheme Lorna Slater was humiliatingly forced to delay. Now, you would hope that the most knowledgeable voice in Parliament on this issue would have been the Minister in charge, but it wasn't. Again, it came from our benches. Maurice Golden has been all over this issue and the detail on it, warning the government for months about the problems they were creating. Through his persistent campaigning, we now have a delay to this scheme, but it needs an overhaul if it's actually going to work. The Scottish Government is clearly anti-business, but we in the Scottish Conservatives are unashamedly pro-business, pro-growth and pro-worker. We were the only party holding the government to account over its slow payment of grants and lifting of restrictions in the pandemic. We were the only party challenging the anti-business policies like the rent freeze and short-term let controls. And we are the only party opposed to raising taxes on 1.4 million Scottish workers. While the other parties pretend to be false friends of the business community, it is the Scottish Conservatives that actually stand up for their interests. For people of all political backgrounds who believe in a competitive, dynamic Scottish economy, this party, the Scottish Conservatives, is your natural home. Yet it's not just economic growth that the SNP and the Greens have put at risk, but rural and coastal livelihoods too. Humza Yousaf's government, propped up by the wine bar revolutionaries Patrick Harvey and Lorna Slater, is intent on making it harder for farmers to farm and fishermen to fish. As someone who studied at an agricultural college and represents so many coastal areas, those sectors and communities will always be at the heart of this party's agenda. One issue that they face is rural theft, which costs our farmers millions of pounds every single year. That's why I can announce that Rachel Hamilton will bring forward a bill in the Scottish Parliament to better protect farm equipment from being stolen and sold on. We'll also deliver a rural development bank to invest in rural projects and businesses and change procurement rules to ensure that public bodies like schools use good local food, so that the Scottish public sector backs Scottish farmers. And for Scotland's coastal communities, we will oppose the blanket introduction of highly protected marine areas every step of the way. Under my leadership, the Scottish Conservatives will always be the champion of rural Scotland and our food producers. Now, another area in which the Scottish Conservatives are challenging the Holyrood consensus and representing the majority of Scots is justice. Again, we heard in the panel session this morning so many important issues coming up. And we know that the SNP have watered down sentencing so far that even rape is no longer considered an automatic jail sentence. Let that sink in. In Scotland, we are giving community sentences to rapists. This SNP government is attacking women's safe spaces and protections through the Gender Reform Bill, while also taking a soft stance on the men who commit horrendous crimes. On justice, Humza Yousaf's government has all the wrong priorities and values. The rights and protections of criminals are being put above victims whose lives have been devastated. The Scottish Conservatives are the only party demanding a wholesale change in how justice is delivered in Scotland and backing our police to tackle crime. We want to see whole life sentences introduced for the worst crimes, and at this conference we've set out plans to toughen up community payback orders. And through Jamie Green's Victims Bill, we have a plan to put victims first in our justice system, something that has been ignored by so long. So while the other parties all support a soft-touch approach to justice, the Scottish Conservatives are the only party who believe that crime should be properly punished by the law. And one such crime not being properly tackled is spiking. Imagine going for a drink at the local pub and vomiting and passing out after just a single drink. Well, that's the experience of 1 in 10 women across the United Kingdom. In the last year that we have figures for, there were 444 incidents reported to Police Scotland. Spiking is a significant risk to both women and men across Scotland. And that's why I thought it was absolutely right, and I was delighted to see my colleague Russell Finlay announce on STV last night Scottish Conservative plans to tackle this awful crime. His bill would ensure that testing kits and trained staff are available at premises as a condition of their licensing. This would mean that anyone who suspects that their drink has been spiked can get it immediately tested, ensuring that the victim is protected and there's a significantly higher chance of catching the culprit, and we tackle the scourge of spiking. Now, throughout this conference, we've already heard it today, we'll hear more tomorrow, we are bringing forward the policies that matter to across Scotland. A community benefit law to help renovate scheme to cut family bills, protecting GPs and delivering better mental health emergency response, offering teachers a new deal to restore Scotland's education system for the next generation, investing in a right to retrain, to build the skills we need to grow Scotland's economy and create good jobs, tackling spiking and toughening up community sentencing to put our justice system on the side of the victims. Those are just some of the policies we are taking forward to tackle the real priorities of the Scottish people. But it's not just about policies. We will continue to hold the SNP government to account. We will represent the views of the majority of our country who feel that the Holyrood consensus doesn't speak for them. And we will take forward our own positive ideas and solutions to show that the Scottish Conservatives have an optimistic and ambitious vision for our country's future. This failing SNP government, mired in scandal and sleaze, cannot focus on governing our country. They cannot tackle the big challenges Scotland is facing. And it's painfully obvious that Humza Yousaf is not up to the job of being First Minister. At the general election next year, people across Scotland have a choice. They can give Humza Yousaf a blank cheque, the thumbs up to continue to lead an incompetent government and to focus on the priorities of the SNP, or they can unseat SNP MPs and their referendum obsession and send a strong signal to Humza Yousaf's government to focus on the real priorities of Scotland. And the best way to do that, in seats the length and breadth of Scotland, is to support the Scottish Conservatives. We've made a strong start at this conference, but this can only be the beginning of our mission. We need to re-earn the trust of people who've supported us in the past and reach out to people who've never considered us before. The vast majority of Scots, of all political backgrounds, are just looking for a party to focus on the bread and butter issues that matter to them. We need to be that party. As the Nicola Sturgeon era of Scottish politics comes crashing down, we enter a new chapter in our nation's history. The SNP are losing the trust of the Scottish people, but no party has yet filled that vacuum. All bets are off. Scotland stands at a crossroad. If we want the country to take a fresh look at our party, then we need to offer a positive vision that Scotland needs. We need to be the party of all of Scotland, focused on improving the lives of people up and down the country. We need to rise above the partisan interests to tackle the big challenges we all face and show the people of Scotland in every community across our country that the Scottish Conservatives are the ones who are focused on Scotland's real priorities. Thank you very much.